What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Debbie Rao YouTube channel. It is the end of June. We're going to get started and start talking about college football top 25s. And we're going to be giving you guys full team breakdowns, offense and defense, and our schedule breakdown. So we're looking at the top 25 teams in college football. We're going to start at 25 and work our way up. We are using ESPN's rankings. So if you're mad at where your guys are ranked, do not yell at us. It is not our consensus rankings. These are just flat out ESPN's. Go yell at them. They won't listen, but it's okay. Now, we're going to start with number 25, the North Carolina Tar Heels, led by Heisman hopeful Drake May. So we're going to get into the whole roster, where that looks, what their team looks like, everything really. So if you're a North Carolina fan, if you are a college football fan, this is the place to start getting ready for the 23 season. So stick around as the intro is going, hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll dive in. All right, let's dive in. Let's talk about it and kind of get into it. Now, the one thing I will say from last year in 2022, to just give you an update, just kind of talk about it. They were 9-5 last year. They really fell down the stretch of the season, though. So the biggest thing about North Carolina, they started off really hot, but then when you get into like the season as they went, they really struggled. They lost the four of the last games: Georgia Tech, North Carolina State, Clemson, and then they lost in Oregon. In the bowl game. So that definitely was a struggle there. Offensively, where we saw that a little bit, that is why, they have a new offensive coordinator now. They brought in Chip Lindsey. Phil Longo left. He's out in Wisconsin now. So the idea is when we break this down, we're going to be looking at what that came from. Like, what does that look like with that new offensive system there? Now, we do know what they do have. They got Drake May. We're going to get into that. He had that breakout year. And to be honest with you guys here at the channel, if you to trust us here, is me and Christian were really high on Drake May 2 or 3 years ago. Like, we were really high on him coming out, and we talked about it. We said, hey, like, this is a kid that you got to keep your eye on now. Now he's kind of that guy that we've been mentioning. Hey, could be that. Hey, some people have him as a QB1. I think that's a little crazy, but that's kind of where we're at here. So that is their season last year. 9-5. Mac Brown's done a fine job there, but they've just struggled down the stretch, and you can't lose to a Georgia Tech team like they did last year. So we got to see that improvement, and that's definitely been on there. Now, this is what their offense looks like as we go through it. I'll have Christian kind of lean into the just overall viewpoint of their offense. Just know that there was talks about Drake May possibly transferring. Alabama was thrown out there. There's a lot of places that were thrown out there. He stayed, I think, for a few reasons. I think that he said, hey, we need a new offensive coordinator. He was looking for just ways to get developed in the NFL. So this is what he's got working with. What do we think about this squad, Christian?
So it's definitely interesting. You're excited about 80% of the offensive line returning. I think when you look at Willie Lampkin, we'll talk about, key transfers in. Willie Lampkin's their new starter, and he was very good as well last year. So you're looking at an improved offensive line. I don't think they were the strongest group last year. They were fine, but there were times where Drake May certainly had to bail them out. And then when you start to look at their weapons, it's just a lot of unproven guys.
Yeah.
JJ Jones, hasn't been that great. Devontae Walker, Nate McCollum, another couple of transfers that will play key roles on this team. And then you're kind of looking at some underclassmen: Gavin Blackwell, Kobe Pace, or Andre Green. And so you kind of hope that they rely on Bryson Nesbitt, who was a big staple in their offense last year. But there's certainly some opportunity for some of these guys to step up where, Drake May relied on Josh Downs quite a bit last year. And so I think one of these guys is going to have to step up for them to kind of repeat what happened last year.
Yeah. There's a lot of talent in this room, but they have to really elevate their game if they want to win the ACC. Like, you're looking at, especially that wide receiver room that we're going to get into. I'll tell you right now, Kobe Pacer and some of these other guys, I like them. Like, I like their talent. It's just they got to step up. You've seen that high school tape. I will say, like, for me personally, looking at this room, I think having that offensive line return is huge for them. Like, just looking at like how they did that, there's an offensive line deficit in across the country right now. Unless you're one of the big dogs, you really are struggling at that offensive line spot. For them to have that returning, I think that's massive for everybody, especially Drake May, but also that running back room, which I think is really talented. They just didn't get utilized that much last year. When you're looking at, like, really moved around a little bit. Amari Hampton, Elijah Green, really around that 400, 500-yard mark. So that's going to help them. So that's, I think, somewhere to kind of look at to understand, like, okay, moving forward, offensive line's big and help out Drake May, development 100%. Now, when we get into notable losses, though, let's talk about last season. I think the biggest one for me is Josh Downs, Antoine Green as well. Asim Richards, okay, offensive tackle there, as we kind of mentioned when we talk about their offensive line. But Downs hurts, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Downs. We've talked about Josh Downs on this channel and on the Football Guys show as well. I mean, very, very talented receiver that probably didn't garner the hype that he deserved throughout his draft process. And he was a day two pick, and
Yeah.
so you're looking at a very, very impactful wide receiver that could do a lot. A lot of people bubble Josh Downs into this like he's a slot receiver role, but he wasn't. He was winning downfield. He was going up and snagging jump ball opportunities from Drake May. And right now, we kind of have to see proof that these other guys can do that for him.
Yeah, and I thought Downs, like you mentioned, I just thought he elevated his game when other receivers didn't in that room. So if that's the case, then like J.J. Jones had 434 yards, but it wasn't really there. And again, we didn't put him up here, but Jacoby Criswell transferring to Arkansas, that's obviously going to impact him later next year, depending on where that room looks. But yeah, I think notable losses were those three. When we get into the recruits, though, so on the offensive side, we're going to be talking about this and going through each side of the ball. On the offensive side, they got some guys coming in. I think, when you're looking at Chris Culliver, 4-star kid, 25 ranked wide receiver, out of North Carolina, they really recruited North Carolina well. They're really recruiting that area really well. Mac Brown's done a really good job of that. So shout out to him because I think they really kind of dived into that. They got 6 kids coming from Georgia, 6 from North Carolina, and 6 from Virginia. So they really are in that area. And you're looking at Christian Hamilton as well. 4-star kid, 49th overall, 6', 175. Culliver gives him that 6'3" kid, 174. So kind of a little bit of a different build there. This guy we were talking about in pre-show, Tad Hudson's a big old boy, man. Big'em, 6'3", 220, coming out of high school. And you were talking about, obviously when you're looking at the depth chart for them, they do have Connor Harrell there. But you were saying, hey, Tad Hudson could win that job based on what you saw.
Yeah, next year, of course.
Yeah, not this year. Not with Drake.
He's not
Drake's
beating
not.
Drake out. I do want to go back to those wide receivers though, because I think when you pair that with who's the other freshman kid from last year that we liked, Andre Green.
Yeah.
I always confuse him and Antoine, but
Yeah.
I think there's a real possibility that one of those three steps up and is an impactful player
Mhm.
for them. I give the edge to Green simply because Mac Brown hasn't shown a willingness to get freshmen on the field. Even the running backs last year, they didn't see the field nearly as much as they should have based on their talent. So I do wonder if Green is that guy that steps up. But from these recruits, when you're looking past this year, I think you are excited about the composition of that wide receiver room and the weapons that could potentially be around Tad or Connor Harrell.
Yeah, 100%. I do think so too. And when you're looking at that depth chart that we just looked at, like JJ's fine. I think he's a good solid piece there. But if you get one of these playmakers and put him in there, man, I think that could elevate that offense. And you're looking at pushing them there. Other guys here: Jordan Louis, Julian Randolph, Nolan McConnell, Paul Billups, RJ Grigsby, DJ Guest. So when you're looking at overall, not a bad class in terms of the offensive side of the ball. I thought they did really well on the defensive side. Their composite rank on 247 was 30th. So when you're looking at that, he has them right there. And with Drake May, you don't necessarily need top 5 classes because Drake's going to elevate that team there. Now, what they did do, though, I thought North Carolina did a good job too in the portal. So they went into the portal and they grabbed some transfers. And we talked about Willie Lampkin already in terms of kind of shoring up that offensive line, that one new starter they're going to have there. As far as the offensive guy, we got to talk about the wide receivers, right? Nate
Yep.
McCollum coming from Georgia Tech, Devontae Walker coming from Kent State. And I have this weird, we're going to struggle with Devontae's, or at least I am, because we have seen a lot of G5 to Power 5 transfers struggle. We saw it last year with Pitt. We've seen it multiple times with different kind of wide receivers out there. Do we think Devontae can take that kind of jump? Do we have faith in Devontae? Last year, 921 yards, 11 touchdowns, 95 targets. Do we think he can continue to do this, or is he going to have that kind of, Power 5 going to have to take some time?
So that's my initial thought was that, in the manifesto, which we do on our Patreon, for those that don't know, we had him being in a battle with Andre Green.
Yeah.
We had Andre Green winning, but then Devontae Walker actually walked in there this spring and showed out. He stood out as potentially Drake May's top target this year, and he certainly had a fantastic spring to get himself on the field. Now, when you look at the composition of that current wide receiver room, I don't think that that's anything to be super proud of. I think, we've got to see it against real competition. And when we get
Yeah.
to the defensive side of the ball, the North Carolina DBs were also new there. So there's certainly a lot of things working in his favor. I hope the hype is real, but I also could see a world in which he's not that, top tier impact player that Drake May kind of needs, and then maybe that opens the door for one of those other guys to step up.
Yeah, in my opinion, Devonta's got to really step up for this team to go. Like he's got to be that kid for them. If he's going to do that and come and step in, he's got to really elevate. And I think from an analyst side and even from a fan side, that should make you nervous a little bit that you have to rely on a G5 transfer. I think that is where that offense kind of makes you nervous there. Nate
Mhm.
McCollum is good though. I mean, last year we had 60 catches, 655 yards, and 3 touchdowns too. So like I do think maybe with Nate being there, these other freshmen that could step up, when you're looking at that roster, maybe that'll elevate, this team to where they don't maybe need Devontae to necessarily be that elite alpha. They do need to play well, but maybe not that alpha status. So I think they did well in the portal. I think they added the guys they needed to add.
Yeah, and quickly on Nate, so that's a guy that with Georgia Tech, they got the ball in his hands very quickly, and I think that
Yeah.
that is something that is going to be a staple of this Chip Lindsey offense is
Yes.
utilizing guys that can do something after the catch. Nate profiles better in that type of role, in my opinion. So I think one of these two guys can step up and be what they need. I think Nate's your starting slot receiver, and I think you're pretty happy with that considering what you just lost in Josh Downs.
100%. All right, let's go over to impact players. Then we'll dive into the defense. So impact players for us, Drake May's a pretty easy one. He's going to be up there in the
Yeah.
Heisman race. With how he goes, North Carolina goes. If he plays well and he really kind of elevates that, I will say the last few games he struggled a little bit. And when you go and watch like QB school, he kind of broke down his game against Oregon. There's a lot of like he does a lot of the good things, but he needs help too. Like there was a lot of stuff like tucking and running. I think mechanics kind of broke down a little bit. There was little things that he's going to work on, but he's going to be. Remember, last year was his really only year starting, so like he's going to develop. That's the fun part about him. We like Bryson Nesbitt here at the channel. We really think as far as tight end sleepers and overall, I think he could be that guy. And obviously Devontae Walker. Anything left with these guys in terms of the impact and what you want to see from them?
Drake May does need to work on his mechanics. I think that's
Yeah.
certainly a thing that I highlighted that. I did an all 22 breakdown on the Patreon if you're interested in watching that. But he's got a really really long release, and I think one of the things that kept him in North Carolina was the convincing that they will work on those things and get him ready for the NFL. I just need to see it. He needs to shorten up that release, and I think especially with this group of pass catchers, there's less room for error. So yeah, I mean, overall though, like yes, he's in the Heisman discussion. There are things he needs to work on to boost his draft stock, really.
Yeah. All right, let's go over the defense side of the ball. So here's our defense. Why don't you walk us through what they got, what they're kind of coming back with, and because this was an area that they definitely needed to get better at over this offseason.
Yeah, so they returned 72-ish%, 72.7% of their starters, but the turnover happened very much so in the secondary. So they lost Storm Duck, they lost Tony Grimes, kind of impact corners for them.
Mhm.
They did have some transfers in. Where their strength lies is in their front six, really. They run a front six with a star that kind of operates as an in the box safety, but also a slot corner. And DeAndre Boykins is a good player, but their strength certainly lies in their defensive line and those linebackers. Those linebackers are going to be kind of what keeps them in games, hopefully, if they can generate some pressure, get to the quarterback, and things like that. Overall, though, this is where, like, we talked about the worries with the offense. They don't even compare to the worries with the
Yeah.
defense because that was already a bad secondary, and all that turnover is not going to look good this first year, I don't think. And a lot of these guys are on their last year of eligibility too. So it's kind of like you have to do it or you don't. And that could make or break some of these games as we get into their schedule in a little bit.
Yeah, and really, like their best game last year as a defense was against Virginia Tech, who had probably one of the worst offenses in the ACC. They only gave up 10 points. Outside of that, though, they gave up 34 to Wake Forest. They gave up, when they went on that losing streak, 21 to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was really bad and reeling at that point. Gave up 30 to North Carolina State. They gave up 39 to Clemson and 28 to Oregon, which isn't actually, retro speaking, it wasn't bad, but you want to give your offense a chance. And when you're looking at what they did for their average scoring margin, it was only plus 1.5. With an offense like Drake May and Josh Downs, you had to give them more time. And especially in this, like that should be way better than that, not middle of the pack, 55th in the nation. When we're looking at overall notable losses, you kind of mentioned Storm Duck. Anything else on the notable losses here?
No, I tossed Raymond on there. He got drafted. I don't think he was very much so an impact player for them last year. He got drafted based on traits, but he's gone, and so there is opportunity for another defensive lineman to kind of work in and rotate.
Yeah.
And then I left Tony Grimes off there, but I shouldn't have. He should be on there as well. He transferred to Texas A&M. That's a good player. I think those two corners were certainly arguably two of their best players. I know, PFF grades might not say that, but they flashed a lot of really good plays last year. So pretty notable losses in those two.
Yeah, shout out Tony Grimes. Thanks for not going to Ohio State. All right, let's take a look at their recruits. So I think they got two great edge guys. Jay Brown Harvey, 6'3", 215, four-star kid, 25th at his position. Tyler Thompson, 6'4", 200. So these are big ones. Like they're going to come in and really I think it gives them that offensive line that defensive line help that they could definitely maybe be impact, maybe like get out there, get some rotations in. And really with the defense that needed talent, they didn't do too bad of a job. Joel Starlings was in there. Some big guys on that defensive line to kind of shore that up. And again, you mentioned their corners and their safeties. Trey Miller comes in. 3-star kid, though. Didn't really when you're looking at a cornerback spot, Caleb Cost, 3-star kid. Ty Adams, 3-star kid. And we're talking about, so are they going to be able to develop that secondary? And to your point, I really feel like that secondary is something that they didn't necessarily shore up. When you're looking at that, we'll talk about the portal and where they got those additions at. But that's really the make or break of the season.
Yeah, and I think they were strategic too, because the two edge rushers, those guys are nationally inside that top 300, and it seems like Mac Brown has wanted to build from the inside out, and maybe that's why he was more comfortable going to the portal for these defensive backs that we're about to talk about. But yeah, I think those two guys could certainly impact because I'll be honest, the strength lies in their front six, front seven, but also there's some holes there. Miles Murphy, there's another Miles Murphy, not the one that just got drafted from Clemson. He didn't play very well last year, and he was supposed to be one of those guys that stepped up.
Yeah.
One of these two guys could come in there and take the job. So
yeah. Now, what you talking about with the transfers, I like Amari Gaynor. I think that's a good pick there in terms of where he's going from Florida State to North Carolina. He was a 4-star kid coming out. Amani Chapman, as you look here from Virginia Tech coming over, they're really going to rely on him. Derek Allen as well. So when you look in here, they definitely kind of, you can see they addressed that secondary. But again, when you're relying on these transfers, I know Elijah, even, Huzzy, he's a 4-star transfer, but a smaller school. So when you're looking at that, they're going to have to really, really step up for these guys.
Yeah, Huzzy had a really good spring. I think that he's probably walking in as the starting to shut down corner is what they're hoping. But that's the problem, right? Is that these three defensive backs are probably going to start this year. And so it's a transitional period, but like I said, they've got to figure it out if they want to win. We'll talk about their schedule here in a bit, but if they want to get over their win total, I think that these guys have to perform.
Yeah. All right. Give me their impact players. Go. Tell me everything I need to know about these guys.
Well, so Kamon Rucker, probably their best player, generates pressures at a pretty high rate, plays that outside linebacker role, which is, a pseudo edge rusher. I think he had 5 sacks last year. He had the most hurries on their team. Cedric Gray just kind of holds down the middle. He's a very talented player. I think, NFL draft circles are really going to like him. And then, these transfer DBs, like I just keep on harping on, they have to be impact players or this team is not going to be very good on defense.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's dive into the schedule and then we'll get you guys out of here. So here's their schedule moving into 2023. Their over under is 8.5, right? So 8.5 is where you're looking at. I think that South Carolina game looms large right at the beginning of the year. Against Spencer Rattler, what is that going to look like? Is your defense ready to go? Antoine Wells is there. When you think of Knox, the tight end out of South Carolina, like, are you going to be able to match up well with that team in terms of that passing attack? And can you make Rattler make mistakes? Appalachian State is no slouch. They almost lost to Appalachian State last year. Remember that shootout that they had out there? Minnesota's a tough game too. Like those first 3 games there, like they really got to go 3-0 there, at 8.5. I think the ACC schedule gets it's a little easier. I think Syracuse it should be a win there. Pitt is I don't know. Pitt's a weird team sometimes. Narduzzi's going to run the ball 75 times this year. Watch. It's just going to be a nasty game there. Virginia should be down this year. Georgia Tech probably down. Campbell. So really, like beginning of the schedule and then the end of their schedule is really where the bread's going to be made there. What do you think? Are you over under that 8.5 here?
I think they're going to get 9 wins again.
Okay.
I think one of the like impact games on that number is that Miami game, because if Mario Cristobal gets that defense rolling a little bit in Miami, Tyler Van Dyke is fully healthy and has a good year, I think that's one of those games where they could overlook it, knowing that they get Virginia, Georgia Tech, Campbell right in a row. And so that could be like a look ahead. We've just got to get through Miami to get to the easy part of our schedule. So that's the one I worry about. But you're right. The first 3, the last 3, and the South Carolina game reminds me of, you remember when Sam Howell was about to come out that last year,
Yeah.
and he had a Thursday night game to start that season, and he went out, he played like crap. North Carolina lost, and they had all that hype. I worry that that's what that South Carolina game is, because that South Carolina is a good football team, and I think that is one of those games that could really set the tone for the season.
Yeah, no, I agree too. So, we're going to do all these over-unders and we'll mark them down somewhere. So my model has them at 7.8 wins. I'm just kidding. I don't have a model. What am I talking about? But I put them at about 8. I think they're at 8 wins. So I'm going to take the under there. And I think you highlighted that Miami game to me. And the South Carolina game is no joke. Minnesota is not a bad team. If they can figure out that quarterback situation, they have a very stable running backs there. And I just, I like Mac Brown. I don't know if I trust Mac Brown. Like when you saw that decline last year, at the end of the year, like, and I think he's done well. So North Carolina fans don't yell at me, but I don't know necessarily when you're looking at that, what that's going to look like in terms of like, can they be consistent enough to get to that 9? I think it's a great number. 8.5. Vegas knows what they're doing. So you really like, I'm sitting at 8. I'm not confident going either way on this one, to be honest with you. So I wouldn't necessarily throw all my money down on this. Now, I did want to highlight one last thing before we get out of here. We'll do last thoughts overall, just kind of like just to talk about it. But when we get into it, the one thing about that new offensive system that they have, and the thing that I brought up pre-show, we talked about it. That offensive system now with Chip Lindsey being there, they really struggled in the red zone. He has struggled in the red zone and scoring. So when you see this at 2019 at Troy, they were 49th in red zone scoring. In 2020, 99th, 2021, 73rd, and then last year at UCF, 67th in touchdown percentage. So they've got to figure out a way to put the ball in the end zone, especially in the ACC, especially if that defense struggles. And so that is something to watch. If they struggle in that red zone, I think it could be a long year for North Carolina. But any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I mean, the team is going to go with Drake May. I think that's a very important piece. Quarterbacks at the college football level can make or break seasons. We've seen it time and time again. Drake May certainly has the keys. Does Chip Lindsey hold him back a little bit? I'm a little worried about that, certainly. But Phil Longo certainly did that down the stretch last year too. So, I think this is a good football team. I think they're rightfully ranked inside the top 25. I'd like to see them finish a little bit higher as someone who appreciates. I am a North Carolina football fan, so I would like to see them have a successful year. But there's a lot of moving pieces this year, so we'll see. We'll see.
All right. We appreciate you guys. We're going to leave you with a Patreon promo. If you like college football, if you're into college fantasy or fantasy in general, if you're a football fan, go check out our Patreon. The link is in the description below. We'll let you know what's in there right now.
Have you joined the Devy Royale's Patreon? With 3 tiers to cover your Devy, college football, and dynasty needs, the Devy Royale has a tier for you. Patrons in the day tier or higher get exclusive access to the rankings database, including consensus combined Devy and Dynasty rankings, each analyst's personal rankings, and separated Devy and Dynasty rankings for every type of fantasy football draft. Patrons in all tiers get access to the incredibly active Discord server, in which our community collectively helps each other win fantasy leagues and has fun in the process. Last but not least, all patrons in the day tier or higher get access to the College Football Manifesto, a more than 300-page document highlighting every Power 5 college football team, Devy players, mock drafts, strategy guides, position battles, and so much more. Head to patreon.com/the Devy Royale to join today.